the noise of the brakes, the impact, the cold asphalt against her body. Debbie couldn't remember the car itself, only the feeling that the world had completely lost balance at that moment, and then everything went white. Time simply stopped. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in a hospital room, surrounded by the constant beeping of machines. She had tubes in her arms, bandages on her knees, and a persistent pain in her hip that wouldn't let her breathe properly. The doctor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, explained that she had been hit on a busy avenue and that emergency surgery had saved her life. Rick, her husband, was there. Not with tears or declarations of love, and he was never like that, but with presence. He sat next to the bed, asked about the food, exchanged messages on his phone while she slept. Sometimes he read the news aloud to keep her distracted. It was what he knew how to offer. On the third night, the doctor returned for a more detailed conversation. With a chart in hand and a neutral expression, he listed the limitations she would face: chronic pain, physical therapy for an indefinite period, difficulty walking without assistance for at least a year. He mentioned, almost as a footnote, that her reproductive organs had suffered significant damage. Pregnancy was impossible. Debbie looked at the white ceiling in silence, trying to absorb every word, every implication. But the question came, low, instinctive, escaping before she could contain it. I won't be able to have children. The doctor hesitated, then gently shook his head. His eyes, for the first time, showed something beyond professionalism. Before Debbie could fully process the information, Rick commented in an almost neutral tone, "Thankfully, this wasn't part of our plans." She turned her face to the side and didn't say anything. Because it was true. They had never seriously talked about having children. But for Debbie, it was never a certainty. Just a maybe one day. A quiet hope kept in some corner of her heart. A window that was now closing without warning. The following week, Debbie was taken to her mother Carol's house. Her recovery required constant care that Rick, with his demanding job at an accounting firm, couldn't provide. Carol treated her with an almost childlike tenderness, making homemade soups and reading to her in the afternoons, as if the pain could be dissolved in motherly affection. The small two-bedroom apartment became a refuge, scented with chamomile tea and childhood memories. Rick came to visit her, initially every day, then every other day. He brought medicines, asked routine questions about her recovery, gave her a light kiss on the forehead before leaving. He rarely stayed for more than an hour. Time went by. The visits became scarce. He was late, sent messages saying that work was demanding, that he needed to finish reports. When he was there, he seemed restless. He fidgeted with his watch, frequently looked at his phone. He no longer commented on the news or read jokes from sports sites. He just waited for the time to pass. When Debbie started taking her first steps with the help of a cane, 3 months after the accident, she decided it was time to go back home. She missed the smell of her pillow, the routine from before, the life that now seemed so distant. She needed to regain some control. "Are you sure, my daughter?" Carol asked, concern evident on her aging face. "You still need help to take a shower." "I'll manage, Mum. Rick will help me." Rick picked her up by car on a Sunday morning. He helped with the bags, placed the cane in the back seat. He asked twice if she was sure about the decision. She said yes, with a conviction she didn't fully feel. But the return didn't last long. 2 weeks later, on a regular Tuesday, Rick arrived home from work later than usual. He took off his shoes in the entrance hall, as he always did. He placed the briefcase on the sofa. He sat at the kitchen table where Debbie was struggling to prepare a salad. He had no expression on his face when he said, "I think we should separate." Debbie froze, the knife hovering over a half-cut tomato. She didn't respond immediately. She couldn't. The silence filled the apartment like a living entity. She spent the night awake, lying beside him, who was either sleeping or pretending to sleep, trying to understand exactly when he had given up. Was it at the hospital, when he learned about the aftermath? Was it when he had to help her dress for the first time? Or had this resignation always been there, just waiting for the right moment to surface? The following morning, with red eyes and a choked voice, Debbie pleaded, "We can try. I'm getting better. In a few months I'll be walking normally. We can go back to the way we were before." Rick just shook his head, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup he held. He said he was sorry, but he didn't see any more meaning, that he had tried, but could no longer pretend that everything was fine. He stayed in the apartment for a few more days. He slept on the couch. He avoided looking into her eyes. Then he left on a Saturday morning while she was in the shower. No yelling, no hurriedly packed bags, no photos torn from the wall. Just a key left on the kitchen table, and a note that said, "I will pay the rent until the end of the contract. I'm sorry." Debbie cried alone that night, sitting on the bathroom floor because she couldn't get up. Then she dragged herself to the bed. And the next morning, she called her mother. She returned to Carol's house. She resumed physical therapy with more focus. She learned to do small tasks with pain. She learned to sit on the porch and listen to the world go by, even when her own world seemed to have stopped. In the first days after the breakup, Debbie constantly called Rick. She left voice messages, sent emails. "Please, let's talk. Please don't give up like this. Please give me a chance to show that I can improve." He rarely responded. When he did, it was with short, almost formal messages. "I'm paying the bills as promised. I signed the papers your lawyer sent. I hope you are doing better." 2 months had passed. Debbie re-established her routine, relearning to live in small steps. She returned to part-time work as an administrative assistant, a role she could perform even with her physical limitations. She started cutting her hair in a different style. She stored all the wedding photos in a box at the back of the closet. She practiced smiling at the mirror until they seemed less forced. But one day, she felt something strange. Dizziness when getting out of bed, nausea during breakfast, a fatigue that seemed to come from deep within her bones. "Sweetheart, could you be pregnant?" Carol said, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. Debbie denied it immediately. The test said it was impossible. But a doubt took hold in her mind. At the drugstore near her house, she bought a test without really believing in the possibility. It was just to rule it out, to be sure. 2 lines appeared almost instantly. Impossible. The specialist doctor who had been with her since the accident confirmed 3 days later with a serious expression. It was either a miracle or a mistake of nature, but she was pregnant. 9 weeks, maybe 10. "You need to understand that this pregnancy represents a significant risk," he explained, avoiding direct eye contact with her. "Your hip is still recovering. Your pelvis suffered severe fractures. Your uterus was compromised in the accident." "But is it possible?" Debbie asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Can the baby be born healthy?" The doctor sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, it's possible. But the odds are not favorable. I strongly suggest you consider a therapeutic interruption, for your own safety." Debbie left the office dazed. On the bus, she looked out the window, seeing without really seeing the streets passing by. A child. Inside her. The impossibility made real. That night, with a trembling hand, she typed a message to Rick. "We need to talk. It's important." He replied almost immediately. "Something rare. Are you okay? Did something happen?" "I'm pregnant," she wrote, and sent it before she lost her courage. The 3 dots indicating that he was typing appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, the response arrived. "Are you sure?" "Absolute. I confirmed it with a medical exam today." An hour passed without a response. Debbie kept staring at her phone screen until she fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, there was a message sent at 3:47 a.m. "Can we meet this afternoon?" They met at a cafe near Rick's workplace. There were deep, dark circles under his eyes. "How is this possible?" was the first thing he asked without greeting her. "The doctors said you couldn't get pregnant." "They said it was unlikely. Almost impossible," Debbie corrected. "It seems that almost made all the difference." Rick rubbed his face with his hands, visibly upset. "I remember well. They said impossible." "What do you intend to do?" The question lingered between them. Debbie had already spent the entire night thinking about it, weighing all the possibilities, all the risks. "I will have this baby," she said, finally. Rick shook his head, a gesture she knew well. Disagreement, disapproval. "Debbie, be reasonable. Did you hear what the doctors said? It's dangerous. For you, for the child." "I know the risks. You can barely take care of yourself now," he continued, his voice rising slightly. "How do you intend to take care of a baby? And what if it's born with problems? Have you thought about that?" Debbie remained calm, even though she felt tears forming. "I've thought about all of that, and still it's my decision." There was a long silence. Rick looked out the window, then back at her. His face was closed, his expression unreadable. "I'm not asking anything from you," Debbie added. "I just thought you should know." It was then that he said the words she would never forget. "I don't want a child. I never did. Especially not like this, under these conditions. I already have someone else." The impact of those words was almost physical. Debbie felt as if she had been run over again. This time, however, there was no fainting, no escape into unconsciousness, just the raw reality hitting against her chest. "I understand," she murmured, although she didn't really understand. Rick paid for the coffee that neither of them had touched and said goodbye with an awkward wave. He didn't say good luck, nor keep me updated. He just left, leaving Debbie with the certainty that this time there was no one else by her side. In the weeks that followed, the doctors reinforced the warnings. The risk was real. Her life would be at stake. The baby might not survive to term, or might be born with severe complications, or both could die during childbirth. Debbie heard it all. She cried. She prayed, even though she wasn't particularly religious. And she decided to move forward. Out of faith, intuition, love for something she didn't yet know but already felt was a part of her. The pregnancy was difficult, exactly as expected. She experienced pains that left her immobilized, bleeding that took her to the emergency room 3 times, sleepless nights where she counted the baby's movements out of fear they would cease. In the 20th week, when she found out she was expecting a boy, she started calling him Kevin, a strong name that sounded like a winner. "You need to be strong, Kevin," she would whisper to her belly on the toughest nights. "We both need to be." In the 30th week, the doctor recommended complete bed rest after an episode of premature contractions. Carol temporarily moved into the guest room, taking over the house duties and the work that Debbie was still trying to do remotely. "I've never seen anyone as stubborn as you," Carol would say, adjusting the pillows under her daughter's head. "But I think this boy will be the same. He's fighting to be born against all odds." And Kevin grew, slow, fragile, but alive. With each ultrasound, with every heartbeat detected, Debbie clung more to hope. On the day of delivery, in the 36th week, everything hung by a thread. Hemorrhage, unstable blood pressure, the medical team on high alert. Debbie heard someone mention emergency surgery, saw the concerned look on the obstetrician's face. Then she felt the effect of the anesthesia and entrusted her fate, and Kevin's, to the hands of those professionals. When she woke up, she was in the ICU. She blinked a few times, trying to focus her vision. Carol was by her side, her face marked by tears, but smiling. "He's alive," was the first thing she said. "Small, needing help to breathe, but alive." Kevin was hospitalized for 62 days. Each one of them was a battle. Debbie learned the language of the machines, the meaning of every number on the monitors. She learned to touch her son through the incubator openings, to sing to him even when her own voice faltered. She learned to celebrate small victories, 1 more gram of weight, 1 less hour of supplemental oxygen. It was a miracle in progress, the doctors said, now with a respect they did not show before. The faith of that mother had been rewarded. When she finally took Kevin home, to Carol's house where they now lived permanently, Debbie took a picture of him sleeping in her lap. The tubes were gone. There was only a small baby left with fine dark hair and a serene expression. She sent the image to Rick via message. No text, just the image. 2 days later he replied, "One day maybe I will meet him." Debbie was outraged by the response. After everything they had gone through, was that it? A vague, almost indifferent comment. But she didn't reply. She decided she would not nurture empty hopes. The months passed. Debbie adapted her routine to the new reality. She got a job that she could do from home as a freelance writer. Carol became a devoted grandmother, although she often repeated that Rick should at least send a decent allowance. When Kevin turned 6 months old, she received a message from Rick asking if he could visit them. Debbie hesitated, but agreed. He appeared on a Sunday afternoon. He brought a teddy bear, looked at the baby for a few minutes, said he was happy that everything had worked out. And he left after less than an hour. That visit gave Debbie false hope. Maybe he was changing his mind. Maybe, upon seeing his son, something had awakened in him. But Rick never returned. She finally understood. There are people who cannot stay, who do not know how to face discomfort, the unpredictable, the different. And there was nothing she could do to change that. In the following years, Kevin became the center of Debbie's world. He grew up curious, smiling, full of light, despite developmental delays that required constant therapies. And Debbie, with her scars, chronic pain, and occasional longing for what might have been, learned to live a new version of herself, stronger, more patient, more complete than she ever imagined she could be. It was on a quiet afternoon in the park, when Kevin was 4 years old, that Debbie met Gary. He was sitting on the bench next to hers reading a book, while his nephew played on the slide alongside Kevin. They started talking about children's books, then about the weather, then about life. Gary was a history teacher, gentle, quiet, with eyes that seemed to smile before his lips did. First they became friends, then a constant support for each other, and finally, something deeper, built in small moments. Gary reading bedtime stories to Kevin, helping with the physical therapy exercises, celebrating when the boy finally managed to walk unaided at 3 years old. On a starry night, with Kevin asleep among cushions in the living room, Gary proposed to her, saying he wanted to be home, father, and future for both of them. Debbie said yes with her whole heart, because finally there was someone willing to stay. And now, when someone asks Kevin, now 6, who his father is, he points with a confident smile to Gary and says, "It's him. It has always been him. Because true love doesn't need to come from blood. It just needs to endure." If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.